Hello everyone, Aidy Burrows here, and welcome to this series for those who have been thinking about making their first game, but maybe don't really know how to go about doing that. Gleb Alexandrov will also be posting videos about this process, and we're going to try to at least get something out the other end and share the process with you. It might seem like an obvious question, but why games? Why bother making a game? Why even bother playing a game? Instead of a game, why not films? Why not just create a short film? Well, for starters, never take life so seriously that you lose your sense of play. Games can be a challenge, and they can be designed to suspend you in that sweet spot between anxiety and boredom to reach that flow state where the obstacles in the game are not so tricky to put you off, but tricky enough to keep pushing you to excellence and mastery and to eventually beat the game. Maybe we'll quench our narrative thirst for a short film at some point, but maybe we can create a game that has some of that narrative juice in it too. We want to try and take advantage of the real-time pipeline in a very high-intensive setting where to maintain a decent frame rate, we're going to need to show and demonstrate some pretty decent organization and optimization of all the various assets, and hopefully we can then share that with everybody. As mentioned earlier, I'm currently developing this game with Gleb Alexandrov. He's the one on the left. So we have got a bit of experience in making games in the past. For example, I used to make games as part of a huge team working on the Lego games. Roles were fairly specialized though, so I pretty much just worked on environment art. So while we think we have some reasonable theories about art and level design, the coding side for us might be a tad tricky, which leads us on to the next point. Why Unreal Engine 4? Back in the day, I enjoyed prototyping game ideas in Blender. I really enjoyed that more visual way of laying out logic bricks. Between us, we have only a pretty basic understanding of Python, so we're naturally drawn to those more visual scripting options. That's where UE4 comes in with its blueprints. It takes a little getting used to, but now there are so many tutorials out there, it makes the learning process so much easier, and we've been getting up and running pretty quickly. We would like to try out more engines in the future. Armory and Godot are definitely in our sights, but currently we're just so much further ahead in our understanding of Unreal Engine 4 to just turn back now. So we're using Unreal Engine 4 and Blender as our main tools, and we're both using PCs, so we'll be developing for PC. But we both have Android phones, so we'll be keeping that in the back of our minds too. And Unreal Engine 4 has various different export settings, so we'll be trying to test it out to expand that as far as we can really. So maybe you're thinking, why Blender? Well, I could probably evangelize on that for days, but to be respectful of your time, hopefully that'll become clear enough if you follow along with some of our other Blender tutorials. And right now with 2.8 and the new real-time Eevee viewport, it all just seems like the right time, a good time to try something in the real-time world. So we've talked about tools and we know the target platform. Now where to start? I think we need some guiding principles. If we have anything of a mantra between us that could be read as a guiding principle, it has to be KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Or keep it stupid simple, whatever you prefer. Incidentally, I noticed that was a guiding principle of Simon Sinek's too, along with some others that are probably pretty helpful to take note of for that matter. So how does that keep it simple principle apply here to us? Well, it rules out, say, a massive multiplayer online role-playing game with skill trees and leveling up to infinity or whatever. It means basically focus on the MVP, the minimal viable product. What's the smallest worthwhile thing we can do? Something achievable, in other words. So with this MVP strategy, it means that we can comfortably fail early, fail often, and fail forwards. Or in other words, learn from our mistakes. At the school my kids attend, they're 7 and 8 by the way, they have signs around the building that read "First attempt in learning," which are quite like the attitude of basically a decent mantra to just keep on going. So what about actual ideas then? We could probably make an entire video about that actually. A quick thought if you're actually struggling with this is to look at the kind of ideas that you seem to enjoy already. That would go for storytelling too, in my opinion, so what kind of themes do you find yourself naturally gravitating towards? And then offer your own perspective on it. Maybe there are some clues lying around in some ideas that you might have already. That's where we're going to start and just see where it leads us. There's the idea I had called Swarm, using some areas of the northern quarter of Manchester as a backdrop. Though this probably would need quite a lot of environment work doing to it, it is actually a very, very simple idea. Basically, you'd just be making your way around these streets, and a little like Pac-Man, you'd be kind of collecting things along the way. And once you've got everything, you've beat the game. But it's not quite that simple, since some swarm of creatures basically pursue you through the streets. I also developed from that idea an offshoot, but the story behind it is likely not quite simple enough to keep to our KISS mantra, though I'd love to return to it. How about an escape the room style game? There are several variations on that theme, like the elevator-based VR game Floor Plan. There is an idea I keep coming back to, which is to make a sort of tower defense, a kind of resource management gameplay idea out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, trying to keep flying windows shut before being invaded, or other ways into the room like the door or the chimney. Perhaps there's something we can do with that idea. So here I've got a really basic orange beam of light coming out from the windows, and if the player passes through it, it's going to reset the level. The only real goal is to actually just reach across the room to the door and avoid that orange beam. Super simple at the moment. It's an idea that needs a lot more thought put into it. As a quick aside, if you're looking for a resource on how to do some of these things in Unreal Engine's blueprints, I'd highly recommend these excellent tutorials by Matthew Pelage to try out some fun mechanics. For example, the gravity gun tutorial results gave us a good way to pick up and throw objects around. Next up, we started playing with gravity some more, so set up a random interval that the direction of gravity could change. That was actually pretty fun, but the room needed to be way bigger to really get the effect of that. Next, using another of Matthew Pelage's tutorials about the graviton surge effect from Overwatch, we added that into it. I'm not really sure why we added it, but it was actually quite fun. So we were thinking, how could we squeeze that in? Maybe rather than throwing it like a weapon, these gravity anomalies could find themselves happening if some kind of extraterrestrial or poltergeist encounter was happening. Another way to extend the interest of a single location was to change the player's interactivity with it. So how about making the player much bigger or smaller? So changing the perspective basically. And so we added that idea and tested it out. We also tried changing the depth of field of the camera to see how that would look as you searched around the floor for some optical lens that boosted your vision, for example. Who knows, just all part of the idea generation phase at this point. Next, I tried out a little idea in Blender, the infinite corridor. So no matter how far you travel, you can never actually reach that door, so just playing with perception. It's a pretty easy idea to do too. Let me know if you would like me to just do a quick tutorial on that, to achieve that within Blender. At this point, we still felt that actually maybe we weren't thinking simply enough, so the room idea was still feeling like it might take a while to get right. So how about a much simpler idea? There are several games out there that are very effective and look and play great despite the simple textures and the simple camera controls. Playdead's Inside and Limbo spring to mind, though these are a lot more ambitious than we're initially planning. Though it is really inspiring to see what we could do if we locked off the camera to the side or to the top. And also that'll give us greater control over the presentation too. With a simple top-down idea, basic enemies, and a simple mission of getting from A just to B to complete the level, it's kind of essential we have a character that is a pleasure to move. So Gleb knocked up this Firefly character concept with how it might control, basically clicking and dragging to set the speed and direction. I mocked up a little animation in Blender to help illustrate how this might look in motion too. Using Unreal Engine top-down project template as a jumping off point allowed us to get things working almost straight away. And at this point we had a great bit of control over the character, but it stopped dead when you let go of the controls and was very stiff in how it moved. So we thought, how about if we controlled it with physics instead? Once we had that set up, we gave the character a boost ability, and when boosting it makes the character way brighter and faster and can kill enemies by smashing into them, sort of like a Pac-Man power pill you can switch on, but you only have so much before it runs out. The orange sphere there is just a stand-in for an exit at the moment. All it does is just reset the game. The bright white light is like an attraction force, a sort of opposite to a black hole, so a white hole if you will, the moth to the flame, sort of dragging anything a certain distance away from it into its doom. This is how the player could think offensively and basically get rid of enemies, luring them into this white hole. The only way to escape the white hole is to be able to boost out of it. And remember that gravity vortex idea from earlier? We're basically just using a simple version of that here for the white hole idea. Gleb concepted out the idea that maybe it could take a little time before you were able to boost. Notice how at this stage we're just kind of assembling different gameplay mechanic ideas together without really thinking too hard about some underlying story. We've just been having very loose themes throughout, themes like evade and escape and light and power. Any one of these gameplay mechanics could get dropped at this point if it doesn't feel like much fun to play. So we'd just be wasting time or getting unnecessarily attached to ideas that we can't let go of if we approached it any other way. Alright, so let's leave it there. It's early days in this game development series by me, Aidy Burrows, and Gleb Alexandrov at Creative Shrimp. So we want to hear from you during this process. Are you getting enough out of this format? Is this of use? Do we need to dive into some finer details on particular aspects a little bit more? What do you find challenging about the game development process? What are the mysteries that perhaps we could help shed some light on if possible? So please let us know, and we'll see you next time.